Welcome to On Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, your host, joined by CJ Vogel. CJ, this episode of State of the Program brought to you by our friend Adam Lowy over at the Lowy Law Firm. CJ, we wanted to take a bigger, broader look at things this week and really try to establish some grades for where we think Texas is at 5 weeks through the season. They are 5-0. The team has won every single game. No game has actually even been close. I guess there were a couple of heartbeat moments in the third quarter against Mississippi State, but that turned into a blowout. Michigan never got going on offense, and it was a ball game by the end of the halftime. Right now, Texas is doing pretty well, particularly on offense, in scoring a lot of points in bunches. And then on defense, obviously, not allowing, I think, how many touchdowns they allowed now? 4 total, 3 total through the entire season. So we're gonna break this down into 2 parts. We're gonna do the offense today and come back and do the defense tomorrow. But I want to ask you this, CJ. What are your thoughts on the offense before we go position by position on the actual grades themselves?
So far, I think you have to be pretty pleased, right? You know, you've eclipsed 50 points 3 times. You've dropped 30 on the road against the defending national champions. It was pretty ugly against Mississippi State a week ago, but in your first SEC game, you scored 5 touchdowns. And I think we all agree you had a pretty solid opportunity to get north of 50 in that game had you executed to the level that we had seen through the first 4 games. So, you know, I think if the drops or the fumbles is your issue right now, with the emphasis on cleaning that up, it will down the road. And that offense, the way that it's clicking, the offensive line, the way that it's remained healthy and executed in key situations, Bobby, I think it's something that Texas fans should be very pleased about and optimistic about when they go up against the heart of their schedule coming up against Oklahoma and Georgia here soon.
It's very interesting. They're Longhorns averaging right at or over 500 yards a game, correct? I mean, they are a prolific offense. Yet there are pieces of this offense that are question marks. I mean, we talk about running back in a minute here. It's kind of like a running back committee, like Tony Hills talked about on Coffee and Football on Wednesday morning. And we've mentioned it as well. But let's get going with the quarterback situation, because I think in my mind, at least, or in my eyes, this is the best quarterback play Texas has enjoyed since Colt McCoy was in Austin. Sam Ehlinger, very good quarterback. Do not get me wrong. But the level of passing going on right now from these Texas Longhorns, whether it's Quinn Ewers or Arch Manning, is extremely high level right now. And I tell you what, Quinn at 73% completion, Arch at 70%. They're both throwing it. I mean, Arch averaging right at 11 yards per attempt. Quinn at 8.7. They both one's got 9 touchdowns. The other's got 8. That's 17 versus 4 interceptions. So they're taking care of the ball typically, right? Is this, I kind of pinch myself a little bit when I talk about Texas quarterbacks because when Texas has had good quarterbacks, even great ones like Vince Young, like Colt McCoy, it has pretended the idea that Texas is going to be a national caliber competitor on the national scene. And I think that's what we're seeing this year. Texas has quarterbacks, plural, and they are a contender on the national scene. For that reason, I'm giving quarterbacks right now an A. They haven't been perfect, but my God, they've been good, CJ.
They sure have. And I'm right there with you. I'm going to give them an A as well. In terms of executing the game plan and putting the team in positions to score, I'd say that's an A+. You know, they've been all over the place. And, you know, we talk about it. Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers, they do it in different ways. You know, Quinn likes the underneath. He likes kind of methodically going down the field, picking up first down after first down. And we see it with Arch. He says, you know what, who's running deep? I kind of want to see the big play. And, you know, his legs have been a big factor in that as well. To be tested on the road against Michigan and for Quinn Ewers to play what I would believe to be his best game of the season in that game specifically, it's pretty impressive. And I
thought that was while 26 of 31 was great against Mississippi State, no doubt about it, especially with the deep balls. The performance by Quinn against Michigan remains the performance of the quarterbacks of this season, because that was the big game.
It absolutely was. And so, if it's unfortunate, but the 4 interceptions for the 2 combined really is what's keeping this grade from being an A+. But again, when you're north of 500 yards, when you're averaging 45 points per game, and when you're sitting there 4th in points per drive at north of 4, you're doing something right offensively. And I think it all stems with the quarterback today.
Yeah, I do too. I think it starts with the distributor, and those two both are more than adequate, highly effective distributors of the football. Quinn Ewers, as we know, will be the guy that's taking the ball or taking the snap in Oklahoma. But we digress because we're doing the grades right now overall for this team. Running back is a different story here, CJ. It has been a really odd group at this point. Only one running back is averaging 10 carries or more per game, and that is just barely. Jaden Blue has 51 carries in 5 games, but remember, 25 of those came in a single game. Trey Wisner and Jarrett Gibson have been used in the 2 and 3 role. It looks like Trey Wisner may be starting to get more of those carries because he's proven reliable from a ball handler and not dropping the ball, etc. But also they're being used a lot out of the backfield too, as receivers, as Steve Sarkisian likes to do in his offense. He'll go 5 wides, he'll go 4 wides, and put those guys out there like Jaden Blue or Trey Wisner in that scenario. What are your thoughts on the running back by committee that we've seen? Because my grade, I feel like when I give it, is not going to be, and maybe it's a little late, a little jaded by the 2 fumbles from Jaden Blue last Saturday. But what do you think of the running backs right now?
Yeah, first and foremost, I'd like to see them all healthy after this bye week going into Oklahoma, right? That's a big key. You've had Jarrett Gibson dinged up. You've had Trey Wisner miss a game. Jaden Blue's missed a game. In its totality, when you look at, the body of work for this group, it's good. It's not great. And I think that's kind of what the expectation was coming into the year, is that, hey, behind this offensive line and with all of these weapons that you have outside at wide receiver, you should be working against a light box and you should be able to take advantage. And we just necessarily haven't seen that so far. I have the running back group as a C+ right now, and that might be a little harsh. But again, you talk about the drops, you talk about the fumbles. That as a whole, I think takes care of most of that downgrade. But then you start looking into the pass protection, and it hasn't been perfect. And unfortunately, that's not the strength of either of the 3 guys that Texas is rotating in this committee. And that's to be expected, right, with their frames and their sizes. But you have to be able to at least help in that regard. And Texas hasn't had a lot, and I'd love to see the fumbles cleaned up. I think that will get cleaned up. But the drops are another thing, Bobby. And I think the drops are something that we've seen over the last 2 years with some of these guys. And so I have it as a C+. I'd like to see that explosive run game get going, partially on the offensive line, but partially on the running backs to find the hole themselves and not hit what they expect to be the hole too quickly. It's part of being a good running back, is kind of running on the fly, if you will. And right now, I think there are a number of runs in which could be much longer than we have seen, more so because the running backs are just maybe a little bit too quick to get out there and hit the hole that they think is there for them.
Maybe I'm wrong, okay, but the only running back 2 running backs have fumbled, Jaden Blue and Jarrett Gibson. Jarrett Gibson's fumbled once, Jaden Blue twice. Jaden Blue also is the one that you're talking about that's dropped some passes. I don't think there have been other drops from the running backs. I hesitate to say this because Jaden Blue scored some touchdowns for Texas, but he's got to be more protective of that ball and in the pass game too, to your point, right, CJ? And so I hesitate to give any part of this offense a C right now, even if it's a C+. And the reason why is quite simple. They have been effective in the pass game. They have been effective in the run game. It hasn't been ideal, but I'm gonna go B- here compared to your C+. You may just be a harder grader than me, which is interesting because I'm usually a pretty hard grader on the Longhorns. All right, I want to say thank you to our sponsor before we get to wide receivers, which have been a pleasure to watch this year. I think suffice to say. I want to say thank you to our sponsor, Adam Lowy, over at the Lowy Law Firm. Adam and his group have been helping injured Texans for 20 plus years. They really care about their clients and go the extra mile for them. If you've been injured in a car wreck of any type, including motorcycle, ATV, 18-wheeler, make sure you give Adam and his group a chance to talk to you. They do a free consultation, no strings attached. Reach out to them, loweylawfirm.com. Again, no strings attached. Just reach out to them at loweylawfirm.com. Thank you, Adam, for your sponsorship of On Texas Football. All right, CJ, can you get higher than what you're going to grade the wide receivers at this point? They've been open. They've caught nearly every ball except for Jonte Cook's drop. I mean, literally, the only ball they've dropped, it was a contested catch over the middle where Isaiah Bond ended up on his backside.
Right.
They can come at you in so many different ways, whether it's Isaiah Bond on the end around, Ryan Wingo on an end around, downfield. DeAndre Moore has been a revelation of sorts for this Texas wide receiver crew. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm giving them an A, and I think they could be an A plus. If I had a nit to pick, it would be downfield blocking outside of Matthew Golden and DeAndre Moore at this point. But otherwise, I really think that the wide receivers in many ways have exceeded my expectations, which is really hard to do given their accolades coming in, all of these transfers, as well as DeAndre Moore's not even resurgence, just what he's done for this team.
I agree 100%. I have him as an A as well. And, if you haul in that 70-yard touchdown pass from Arch Manning against Mississippi State, you're probably looking at an A plus, and that would mean everybody is getting involved and everybody is finding the end zone. And what's funny is, the one real guy that's yet to have that breakout game for Texas is Silas Bolden, who I think we all expect would have a much larger impact in this game or on this team coming into the season, which kind of speaks to the depth. But, they're doing it in all different ways, right? You can see the catch and run. You can see the downfield contested catch ability. You can see it in the running game even. We have the 55-yard run.
I love that content. I love that where you're saying, look, they're showing their versatility.
They are. It's everywhere.
You're right. They have done it short. They've done it in the bubbles screens. They've done it in the intermediate game. They've done it deep. They've done it that is something that those guys are doing that not every Texas wide receiver group, even last year's, did particularly well.
Yeah,
that's a good way to put it.
It's interesting when you look at the distance of target for each of the Texas wide receivers, and every single one of them, for the most part, has had an opportunity to go down the field and make a 40 or 50-yard reception. And I don't know when the last time you've been able to see a Texas team trust a wide receiver to go out there on a 3rd and 8 or even a dire situation like that and go make a play. Texas has done it with Ryan Wingo, Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden, DeAndre Moore. Jonte had his opportunity, and I think we both agree Silas Bolden caught that diving pass a few weeks ago. But my goodness, the depth, the versatility, and the talent speaks for itself right now. I have it as an A plus, and I have it as an A. I have it as an A. There's still more to be desired, and I think you hit the nail on the head there, Bobby. Downfield blocking in the run game, and even some in that pass, that quick bubble screen. That was a scary play for Ryan Wingo to come limping off the field the other day, and that was the result of a wide receiver not getting his block and playing physical on the edge.
Hey, I just look at it. I mean, you got 3 receivers averaging over 4 averaging over 15 yards a catch right now.
It's pretty good.
Isaiah Bond at 18.2, Ryan Wingo at 22.5, Jonte Cook at 17.1, and DeAndre Moore at 15.9. That's only Matthew Golden has below a 15 and has 18 catches for 223, and he's got 3 touchdowns.
Yeah,
I mean, it is a group that it's pretty impressive overall. This was surprising to me. Did you know that Silas Bolden so far this year has more receptions than DeAndre Moore?
Wow, I did not know that.
Right? You would not have thought that because but we'll see how it goes the next, because this is just the grades through the first 5 games. We'll see how much more Silas Bolden maybe gets involved, particularly if they can find a way to get those bubble screens working, because he looks like he might break one at some point, given his ability as a punt returner too. I also want to mention Ryan Niblett and his interplay here between running back and wide receiver. He's certainly been more of a running back, but I just want to give a little hat tip to him because I think he's been a player. I also give him an A as well. If Jonte Cook would have made that catch, I mean, I could be talking about an A+, because look, they've been open and they've caught the ball. Yes. I don't know what else you want them to do. You know what I mean? I get blocking, but sometimes downfield blocking can be hard too. All right, tight ends. Man, I would have taken a B- effort from the tight ends headed into this year and gone home. I would have been, Texas fans would have been perfectly happy with that. And then Gunnar Helm goes off and does what he does in Ann Arbor and reestablishes really what the expectations should be for the tight end position this year. Juan Davis has become an H-back. That is a very good blocker. What are your thoughts right now, CJ, on this tight end group and where you see them headed?
Yeah, I think, you look at Gunnar Helm as maybe the individual on the Texas football team that's exceeded expectations the most through 5 games. And I don't know if I had that on my bingo card, but I'm very happy that it's become the case, right? And I was able to check that box for him to do what he's done so far. You talk about the Michigan game, but there's been 2 games in which he's had catch after run or run after catches where he's hurdled guys, and he's made it look very easy to get downfield and make explosive plays after catching a pass, 5 or 6 yards downfield. If you can do that at the tight end spot, even with what's going on vertically down the field with most of these wide receivers, I don't know where you find, the deficiency offensively in the passing game. Texas, the catch after run ability, I think with Jatavian Sanders was on display last year in all sorts of key situations, right? The little boomerang routes, the little deep crossers that you saw him get loose and make plays down the field. We all thought he was probably the plus athlete of the bunch, but I think that gap's a little bit more narrow than we expected. And even beyond that, he's been tremendous in the running game. He's been a focal point and, coming across for split zones, duos. He's been very effective in pass protection when asked to do so. And then to your point about Juan Davis, Bobby, finding that little niche role. And I think Texas is at its best in the first. I think they moved the football more consistently in the first drive of the game in that first drive out of halftime than they have been in years past, because of what we've seen when they come out in that 12 personnel. And most of that time includes Juan Davis and Gunnar Helm on the field together. So I've loved that. It's a different wrinkle. Teams have to adapt to it. And right now, Juan Davis is making himself a pretty solid role in this team. I have it as an A-. Been very pleased. One thing I'll say is Amari Niblack, where's he been? What's kind of his role right now? I think we're kind of up in the air about all of that. I'd like to see his penalties kind of be toned down before entrusting him a little bit more and having that larger role with the Longhorn offense.
Yeah, penalties on special teams as much as anything for him. I will add this as it relates to Gunnar Helm. He's not perfect. I don't think he thinks he is. If there was a weak spot for his game right now, it's maybe holding up at the point of attack in the run game against bigger opponents. That's natural. But long story short, you gave him an A-. I'll give him a B+. Listen to this stat about Gunnar Helm. He's averaging 13.8 yards per catch. That's more than Matthew Golden, the wide receiver. Just to give you a sense of how big a weapon he has been for the Longhorns, just a really, really pleasant surprise there. All right, I went B+. You went A-. Let's go and talk now about the offensive line, which I've kind of called the foundation of this whole team. I think the quarterbacks have been the distributors. Really, you build it with the offensive front. I almost wonder, and this is what I want to talk to you about a little bit in this segment here, CJ. Do you think they've been better run blockers or not as good a run blockers as they have been pass protectors? Because it sure feels like they've been, and I know they've given up some sacks, but there have been times where they look like they've almost been dominant as pass protectors. I don't know that there's been that often where you feel like they've been dominant as run blockers. Maybe pieces here and there, but their consistency as pass protectors has been really, really strong through 5 games, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And in fact, to pull out a Pro Football Focus stat, they are the highest rated offensive pass protecting unit in the entire country right now. What does that mean? That means in a given pass protection set, they don't get beat and allow sacks as well as anybody in the country. So when you see the sack number start to rise, well, at least per Pro Football Focus, it's coming off of a tight end, a running back, or it's a QB scramble in which there was enough ample time in the pocket to make a play, and the play was a result of a sack because of the quarterback using his legs. So in pass protection alone, and we've seen it in back-to-back weeks, really against everybody so far, maybe sans a Colorado State, but going back to Michigan, that offensive line and pass protection gave Quinn as much time as he needed to make plays down the field, and we saw it time and time again. We saw it against Mississippi State. We saw it against ULM, who has a pretty talented front seven when they get after the quarterback. Pass protection to me, Bobby, is A+. I think it's been tremendous. For 5 games, you allow 1 sack accredited to an offensive lineman. Even after rotating in 6 offensive linemen for most of the year, it's an A+ there. Now, the rest of the offensive line, in terms of what they're asked to do, I'd like to see the bigger rushing lanes. I'd like to see less holding calls, less snap infractions, less false starts. That's kind of where the grade gets dragged down a little bit. And, it's unfortunate. You'd like to look at the Mississippi State game as a one-off when it comes to the penalties. Unfortunately, we just know it hasn't been that case. And you can go back to Michigan with the false starts. You can go back to UTSA with some snap infractions. It's been a lingering thing, and I have their grade as an A-, B+. I think it's right on the edge. Overall, they're keeping the quarterback upright, and I think that's the biggest factor right now.
They have the offensive line has a placard or poster in their offensive line room right now that says they want to be the Joe Moore Offensive Line Award-winning unit. That's the award given to the top offensive line unit in the country. Here's my thought on that. If you took their actual play on the field and removed their penalties, I think you might get there. That I think they're playing, like I said, I think that makes them the foundation of this team. You add in the penalties, and all of a sudden you're like, I get why you come up with an A-, B+. And it's not so much, for me, it's not even so much for run blocking versus pass blocking. And I thought about this. I do think they're really, really good pass protection. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you have Cam Williams and Kelvin Banks, you're going to be good at pass protection. Not necessarily perfect, but good. The run lanes have been there at times. I think that maybe they don't have that A1 back that's just a great running back as opposed to a do-it-all type right now. So I give them a little bit of grace there. But the one that just bugs me are these penalties. And I'm sure they bug the Texas coaches as well. I'm going to give them an A- even with all of those, because I think they would be an A to A+ otherwise. I really do believe that. I mean, I get where you're going with everything, CJ, and I feel your consternation over it. But Texas is scoring a lot of points, and even when they're getting into these 1st and 15s, they're still converting. It's kind of, and I think in large part because the offensive line is giving Quinn Ewers or Arch Manning time to rear back and throw.
And that's exactly, I like that you brought that up, Bobby, because as long as they're good in pass protection, this offense will be able to move the football because of what they have out wide to receive the passes and who they have behind them to throw the passes. And I think if that's where you want to have a strength as an offensive line, especially with this team, that's where it is. So that's certainly an area that I'm looking at saying if they keep up that pass protection, the ceiling for Texas is sky high. And I like the point that you brought up earlier. I'm giving out grades. We're talking about grades that aren't necessarily all A's or A- or A+ for a team that's scoring 45 points a game, is north of 500 yards. And we're sitting here saying, there's still ways for them to improve. There's still ways for them to add points to the board. And so far through 5 weeks, we're sitting there saying, man, this offense is great. It's a lot of fun to watch. And here we are grading with a finer tooth comb, and we're saying, wait a minute. They could be north of 50 points per game in most of these games. So that's certainly encouraging for what's to come when the tougher opponents face off on the other side of the football for them.
Yeah, I've got to say this. Let's talk now about the offense as a whole and grade it, because you just brought up my entire point here, and that is, uh, I I think there are individual ways for them to get better. They can get better on penalties. We talked about that. They can not fumble as much. Uh, Maybe they can get a little bit better blocking on the edge at both tight end and wide receiver, CJ. But the firepower Texas has it alongside this offensive line is just overwhelming people. And when they get going, they can get on top of you quickly, more quickly than just about any team in the country. And that means teams that can't score a lot can get down quickly and all of a sudden become one dimensional. That did not happen against Mississippi State until late.
Right.
That is going to be the key for this Texas offense going forward, because the key will be playing complementary football for Texas. And that means the offense is going to be incumbent on the offense to actually get off to a fast start, to take advantage of opportunities early in games, so that then the defense can lean in to what it wants. So when I'm grading the offense right now, 4 out of 5 games, they've done what their job was. And then, okay, against Mississippi State, they did not, because they didn't get on top of their opponent and let the defense play into it. So if I'm Steve Sarkisian, I'm grading my offense, I'm grading them not just on, did you score points? I'm grading it on, hey, did you set us up for our team to actually play complementary football? 4 out of 5 games, they've done that, and then some. Even in the fifth one, they won by 23 or 22. So I know I'm being hard, but I would go A minus here. 500 yards of total offense per game, like you mentioned. 2 quarterbacks, a bundle of wide receivers. The only issue right now, I think, are turnovers. I think they've had 7, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to go A minus with. I think they got a chance to go even higher, and the firepower on this unit just overwhelming.
Yeah, to be speaking about the pure statistics of this offense so far, maybe aside from turnovers, but to do this with 2.5 games from your backup quarterback, and we could talk about Arch Manning and how great he has been, but to see even maybe a jolt at times in terms of the overall explosiveness of the offense. I mean, how many teams in the country that could look at replacing an all-conference level quarterback with another one? And I think that, to me, is one of the more, overall positives or optimistic points that you could point to in this entire thing, especially for the long-term future of Texas football. But my goodness, 45 points, 500 yards of offense, top 5 in points per drive. They're doing it all right, even with some turnovers mixed in there. I like that A minus grade, Bobby. I'll join you in that.
Okay, A minus. All right, that's going to do it for State of the Program. We want to thank our sponsor once again, Adam Lowy, over at Lowy Law Firm. If you've been injured, a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind, please give Adam and his firm a call. 20-plus years of experience, and remember, they aim to treat their customers and their clients the right way all the way through the process. That's loweylawfirm.com. All right, CJ, thank you so much, bud. We'll be doing defense later this week as well, so stay tuned for that. We've also got a couple other shows here today as well. For CJ Vogel and our producer, Matt Hutchinson, I'm Bobby Burton. Hook 'em.